In order to understand this theory, you have to accept the idea that Michael Afton might have survived the FNAF 6 fire. So essentially the theory I'd like to discuss with you today is that without Michael Afton, Help Wanted would not exist in the FNAF timeline. It would have never happened. Michael Afton is essential for that game to exist, and we'll go into it now. So I don't want to make this too confusing by adding too many layers, and trust me, I have a lot of notes written here. I just want to quickly go over one of the stories from the Pizzaplex books called Help Wanted, and essentially all you need to know is there's an indie developer in that as well, just like the Help Wanted VR game, they talk about an indie developer. To quickly summarize, there's a guy that makes wholesome games, and a Fazbear Entertainment agent comes up to him and is like, hey, you have quite the talent with making video games. Maybe you could make some horror video games for us, poking fun at the ridiculousness of all the accusations and lies that have been spread about the company. But the developer is morally opposed to making the games for the company, and so he declines. And I won't go into like all the details, but essentially they get him to do what they want by altering his perception of reality and making him go crazy. So they do get what they want out of him. It's a really interesting story. I highly recommend it. But all that to say, I think it's pretty obvious that the book is supposed to be based off of how the VR game plays out, because Tape Girl tells us a very similar story. Tape Girl tells us that they lied to us, they lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer, who supposedly made up a bunch of crazy stories that tarnished the brand. But that's not true at all. In their haste to develop this VR game and clear their name, they sent us some things I don't think they intended us to see, such as a hard drive containing emails between Fazbear Entertainment and a certain indie developer. Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer those indie games were designed to conceal and just make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand, it's an elaborate cover-up, a campaign to discredit everything. So there's like two ways you can take that story that she just told us, and they are that this game developer was in on everything with Fazbear, and so they were like, okay, you make these indie games and then we're going to like blast your name though and be like, haha, you suck, but we're going to give you this big sum of money to like cover everything up. So they're working together essentially the whole time, and the indie developer is in on it and thinks it's a great idea because he's getting a buttload of money to make some indie games for this company. And so yeah, he's all in on it, and it's perfectly fine, whatever. But realistically, nobody wants to be blacklisted. Like, that could ruin so many aspects of this person's life and career. The other interpretation of what Tape Girl is explaining here is more aligned with how the books portray the character. The indie developer didn't actually want to do it, and then Fazbear in some way or other forced him to do it against his will. And I think that's more likely of what's happening here. The point wasn't for them to rebrand. They're rebranding because they want to cover something up, a campaign to discredit everything, so that if anybody tries to get word out of what really happened, they'll look ridiculous at this point, because Fazbear Entertainment made this VR game just making fun of all of it because none of it's actually true, when in fact Fazbear Entertainment is fully aware of things that have happened and they just want to get rid of that. The company essentially just wants to sweep everything under the rug and be able to blame everything on this indie dev who is, in their minds, the source of where all these rumors and all the lies about killings and death. But in reality, these deaths really did happen, and these aren't rumors. This is something that really happened in FNAF lore. And that's what Fazbear wants to sweep under the rug and be done with forever. You're probably scratching your head like, how does this connect to Michael Afton? What? Vrar is losing it. But no, essentially, how this connects to Michael Afton is that the fictional VR game that Fazbear Entertainment makes, all of the characters look identical to their in real life counterparts. Specifically, we want to talk about Ennard. So quickly think back to Sister Location. Michael Afton is the only human being who has ever seen Ennard. So in order for the FNAF VR game to get a perfect likeness of Ennard, Fazbear Entertainment would have had somebody who had physically seen Ennard in order to have that likeness in the indie games, which is likely how they got Ennard's likeness. They just pulled it straight from the indie game into the VR game. And Michael Afton is the only human being that fits that bill. Now think about how Michael Afton plays into this. In the book story, the indie developer, when he first meets the Fazbear agent, he's actually really confused how the Fazbear agent knows so much about him. And to me, what that's implying for us in the game universe is that if Michael Afton survived the fire, then he is somebody that Fazbear is already very aware of. And if he survived, they have to get him out of the picture. And so this is the best way they can do that. They get him to make the games and then make him look like a lunatic. And just like that, he's out of the picture. He's nothing. He's not important important anymore. They got rid of him. In the book, the indie developer actually gets killed at the end, so it's possible the same happens to Michael and they actually just straight up get rid of him. They contacted him, he refused, and so in some way they forced him to do what they wanted to do. Fazbear is an evil, evil company. And if Michael is still around in some way or other, to me, the fact that we have like a version of his room recreated in Security Breach is very telling. It means Michael Afton's story isn't over. He's actually still here. And there's still a lot going on in this game. So it's not like there's a ton of evidence to support it, but I cannot get over the ennard thing. That has absolutely thrown me for a loop. There is no way that Fazbear would be able to replicate that character 100%. And if you think about it, a lot of the characters they shouldn't even know about. It's really always been Michael. If Michael's been the one living through all the FNAF games that we play, it makes sense that he's the one that originally developed a lot of this stuff. And yes, I know they use the circuit boards to like scan a lot of stuff in. I do want to quickly look at the specifics of what we know about how Fazbear Entertainment and the VR development team went about making the VR game. So I'll just quote the hand unit audio that we hear in the VR game, and it says, "We went to great lengths to create an authentic VR experience, including using scanned photographs for reference and using original performance routines where applicable. Using proprietary technology developed by Fazbear Entertainment, our VR development teams were able to use vintage control board, almost like plug and play, digitally recreating performances and personalities from the past in an instant." So they were able to digitally recreate a lot of performances and personalities, but it doesn't explain specifically how they would have gotten ennard or anything relating to ennard. So I think what they had to have done is they took the indie games that the developer made, and that's how they got ennard's likeness, because there's no way they would have had ennard's likeness without this developer having added it to his games, because they wouldn't even know about ennard. So at some point, Michael had to have helped with the design of those games. There's no way that Fazbear would have known, without Michael's help, about some of those characters. And as always, I could be completely wrong, but I thought I would bring it up for discussion.